And as we're driving, we see this brilliant flash of white light. And we both looked up into the sky, and there's a second flash and then a third flash. And then this orange trapezoid lit up and just hovered in the sky. And if you're a whistleblower, you have rights. I would also recommend very strongly that you seek the assistance of an attorney before blowing the whistle, not after. That's the mistake that I made. I had to be reactive to everything the government was doing. I thought, well, I'm not the only person who's opposed to this, so somebody's going to say something. And then nobody said anything.
Wow.
And so finally I said something, and the government fell on top of my head. So yeah, I ended up going to prison for 23 months. I have zero regrets. I would do it again tomorrow. I think we would be fools if we didn't have a retrieval program. And of course, because of its very nature, it would have to be classified at the very highest levels. Nobody's asking the government to release the details. Just put our minds at ease that we're not crazy when we see these things in the sky, and then you say, no, you didn't. You didn't see anything.
Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files. Hi, welcome to Lehto Files. I have a very exciting guest today. I'm with John Kiriakou. He's a former CIA officer, whistleblower, and author who exposed the U.S. government's use of torture in its counterterrorism operations. As a veteran intelligence officer, he played a key role in capturing high-profile al-Qaeda members before becoming the first U.S. official to publicly confirm the CIA's waterboarding practices. His revelations led to significant public debate on ethics in intelligence and government accountability, ultimately resulting in his own prosecution. Today, he's an advocate for whistleblower rights. He's a journalist. He has a show, CIA Declassified, and he's a vocal critic of governmental overreach. Thank you, John, for being here. How are you doing today, sir?
Thanks for having me. Doing well, thanks.
Okay, amazing. I was happy to be on your CIA Declassified show. We'll show a teaser later on in the show. But on that, you explained about your own personal UAP experience. Can you tell us about that? My audience would love to hear it.
Sure. When I was 17 years old, my mom and dad bought a restaurant in a nearby town. We lived in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour north of Pittsburgh. It's a very rural area. They bought a restaurant in Sharon, Pennsylvania. It was 20 miles away. And so to get from Newcastle to Sharon, you have to drive through Amish country. And it's very, very dark in Amish country because the Amish don't use any electricity. So my dad and I on the weekends worked the midnight shift. I was a short order cook, and of course he was there to manage the restaurant. So we left our house on a Friday night. It was at 10 o'clock. Figure we'll get there at 10:30 and start working at 11. And we're in Amish country, very, very dark again. And as we're driving, we see this brilliant flash of white light. And we both looked up into the sky, and there's a second flash and then a third flash. And then this orange trapezoid lit up and just hovered in the sky. We pulled the car over and got out. So the thing hovered there for long enough for us to get out of the car. And we're standing there just staring at it without saying anything. A man pulls up behind us and gets out, and he says, "What the heck is that?" And my dad said, "I don't know." And then it just took off at a fantastic speed, unlike anything I've seen or I had seen before or have seen since. I mean, it went like that, fantastic speed. And we just stood there looking in the sky. And then we got back into the car, started driving again. And I said to my father, should we call somebody? Should we call the cops or something? And he said, to say what? We saw a UFO and it flew away. People will think we're crazy. And so we didn't say anything. I told my mom the next morning. She believed us, of course. My dad said exactly the same thing that I did. And I'll tell you, for weeks after that, my eyes were just glued into the night sky. hoping that I could see it again or something again. And that was, 43 years ago. And I've never seen anything like that since.
That's an amazing story. And you said no sound, right? There was absolutely no
No
sound.
sound at all. And it just hovered. And it wasn't terribly far away. I'm going to say it was hovering at, I don't know, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, maybe 3,000 feet, and not making any sound at all, just hovering there. And I should add, too, so it's in this trapezoidal, my fingers can't do it, trapezoidal shape. And in the four corners of it were bright, glowing orange lights, to the point where the orange lights were so bright that they illuminated the rest of whatever it was. And, over the years, I've said to myself, maybe it was a balloon. No, of course it's not a balloon, because of the speed with which it took off like that. And it wasn't just floating there and then it just kind of casually floated away like a balloon might. There's a small municipal airport, just 3 or 4 miles away, but it closes at sunset. And so it wasn't that. And honestly, I don't have any explanation for what it was, other than it was unexplained.
Any idea how large it was or how big it was? I know it's hard to tell at distance.
Yeah, hard to tell, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it was probably 25 or 30 feet across. Bigger than, a Cessna. It was at that airport that I learned to fly years later. So comparing it to a Cessna, yeah, it was 2.5, 3 times the size.
Did
Yeah.
you talk to your father later on, like later in your life about it?
Yeah, I sure did. But it was always one of us saying, remember that thing we saw up in the sky back in 82? It's like, well, how can I forget that thing we saw up in the sky in 82? Yeah, I remember it. And then, because I had seen something, I immediately took an interest. And as I mentioned to you on CIA Declassified, Jimmy Carter saw something that was unexplained and went so far as to file a police report saying that he had seen this thing hovering in the sky. But he said that what he saw was buzzing. It emitted a buzz that he could hear. But if the president of the United States is seeing, things in the sky, then, I don't feel so alone.
Yeah. When is the first time you actually talked about it? Did you feel the stigma? Did you feel a need to keep quiet about this?
I did. I did, because I didn't
Yeah.
want people to think I was crazy or making something up. And I tell you what, over the years I've thought about it, and I've thought, thank goodness my dad was there and my dad saw it, because my father was, this seriously a pillar of the community. Um, when he died, it was on the front page of the local paper. He was that kind of a pillar of the community. And so if Chris Kiriakou saw it, then something was up there.
And did he ever
Yeah.
talk about it
No,
publicly?
no, never. Just to me. And like I say, it was always, remember that thing we saw up in the sky in 82?
Yeah. Have you
Yeah,
seen
crazy.
anything since then?
No,
Anything
nothing
anomalous?
even remotely close. But I've mentioned this a couple of times to friends, close friends, and relatives. And I've been surprised at how many people have seen things that they just have not been able to explain. I mentioned to you on CIA Declassified that I'm very close to a cousin, a second cousin. He's older than I am, 14, 15 years older than I am. And his father owned a restaurant too, here in Alexandria, Virginia. And so when I was a kid, I used to come down here, stay with them, hang out at the restaurant. And he had a friend who was an Air Force pilot. And he told me once that he saw something, some sort of a craft, dive straight down into the water off the coast of Virginia Beach, Virginia, and then seconds later come straight up out of the water and fly away. And I said, what in the world do you think that was? And he said, we're not supposed to use the words flying saucer, but it looked like a flying saucer going down to get a drink. That's what it looked like. And that's always stuck with me as well. And again, this isn't just some nut that you sit next to in a bar. This is an Air Force pilot, a fighter pilot, right? These are the best of the best. They're the guys who have gone through the most extensive training and to be able to handle a craft like that. And if he says that he saw something like that, I believe him.
It's interesting too, because the coast of Virginia, that's basically where Ryan Graves, his 4-ship video, the gimbal.
That's right.
UAP video. And they've seen many other sightings. They said almost daily sightings of these strange objects, a dark cube inside of a sphere, some sort of clear sphere. So it's interesting off the coast of Virginia.
And, it makes me think too, whatever these are, do they congregate around air bases? Or is it because we have air bases and we have pilots and people trained in this kind of thing that we see them there more frequently?
I'm not sure. I think,
I wonder.
we don't know, because the data certainly comes from where our military aircraft are flying, or at least from Aero. The data they released was basically all of our training areas. So it could be where we're looking. Maybe that's why our nuclear sites have so much surveillance. Maybe that's why we're seeing them, or our military aircraft are out there actually seeing these things. It could be, I guess, everywhere, but we're just not looking in those areas. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I was amazed too to see or to hear the conversations between pilots, either released or leaked a year or 2 years ago, where they're saying things like, "Are you seeing this? What is that?" And they're watching these things take off at these amazing speeds that we're just not capable of doing. Crazy.
So you've been interested in UAPs since your own sighting, or have you
I have
just
been.
thought of it recently?
No, since my own sighting. And like I say, I've looked at the skies ever since. I'm a lifelong, well, not lifelong, but since then, telescope user. I have started doing astrophotography. The skies fascinate me, and I so wish I had seen something a second time, just to sort of reinforce my own belief that there really was something out there. But I've never seen it again.
When you were in the CIA for many years, did you ever hear anything about UFOs or UAPs? Because in the Air Force, my whole career, I never heard anything.
No, not a single word. And when I joined the CIA in 1990, we had just initiated this transition from paper documents to computers. I'm gonna date myself here. I don't feel very old, but when I joined the CIA, we had typewriters on our desks, and you could smoke at your desk, as crazy as that is. Oh, and even crazier, there was a barbershop in the basement of the CIA, and they had Playboys out, right? So this was a different era.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a different era. You can't do any of that stuff anymore. But anyway, we started to transition to electronic systems, and virtually as soon as I arrived, I said, only half jokingly, "So where's the UFO information kept?" And my boss laughed. He said, "We all ask that when we get here. There is nothing like that. If there is such a thing, it's with the Pentagon." And that was always my understanding, because I never, ever, ever saw anything related to these kind of phenomena.
Yeah, the same. I remember I was an aggressor in Alaska, actually. That's when we were flying those cool painted airplanes. And we got to take a trip to the CIA. I'll never forget it. We walked through the long entrance, the white tunnel entrance.
Yeah.
And the big deal was it was the highest classified lunchroom we'd ever been in. We're in there eating lunch in this top secret lunchroom. That was like the highlight of going to visit the CIA.
Yeah, even the fast food people have security clearances. We used to have two different lunchrooms. There was the classified cafeteria and the unclassified cafeteria. The unclassified cafeteria was so tiny nobody even bothered to go there. And it was for use during those rare occasions when somebody, it was usually a government worker from some other department or agency, but who didn't have a security clearance, came for lunch. And then they just did away with it because nobody was using it. So now you have to be cleared to get into the cafeteria because half the people in there are undercover. So you can't just have somebody off the street.
Yeah, it was funny. That was the highlight, was the lunchroom for us, the classified lunchroom. But I mean, it really is amazing. You came out as a whistleblower against waterboarding, against our government doing what I think many people would consider as, evil things, torturing people to get information and keeping it secret. So I think it's very courageous for whistleblowers such as yourself to come
Thank
out.
you.
So thank you for doing that. And can you
Thank
give
you for
us some
saying that.
background? What was that experience like?
It was rough.
Mm.
I was the chief of CIA counterterrorism operations in Pakistan after the 9/11 attacks, and we carried out raids, dozens upon dozens of raids, and we caught a man by the name of Abu Zubaydah, who we believed was the number 3 in Al Qaeda at the time. Um, I objected almost immediately to the treatment that we were using on prisoners before we began torturing Abu Zubaydah. For example, the night that we captured Abu Zubaydah, we caught dozens of Al Qaeda fighters. I'm still not allowed to say the number of Al Qaeda fighters that we caught. And this is a minor point, but it's sort of indicative of the way things ended up going. We caught so many people that night that we had to bring them into our safe house for interrogation in shifts. And there was an idiot working for me, and he led this group of 10 prisoners in, and they had hoods on. And I said, "Why are they hooded?" And he said, "We don't want them to see our faces." And I said, "Are you seriously telling me that you have never read the Geneva Convention? It is a war crime to put hoods on them. Seriously." I said, "Take the hoods off." And he said, "Wait a minute." He tells these other guys that were standing there. He said, "Wait a minute. If you take the hoods off, I'm going to report you to headquarters." And I said, "Oh, I'm already reporting you to headquarters for committing a war crime. Take the hoods off." We took the hoods off. We reported each other, and I got in trouble.
You got in trouble.
I got in trouble. I said, "It is a war crime to hood prisoners." And headquarters, a senior officer at headquarters told me that the world has changed since 9/11. We do things our way. And I said, "But the Constitution hasn't changed." Behind my back, they started calling me the human rights guy. And I didn't care. And then a friend of mine, I have this good friend. He's a lot of things. He's a Renaissance man. He's a brigadier general in the Army. He's a psychiatrist at the CIA, a brigadier general in the Army Reserve. He's a psychiatrist at the CIA. We go to the same church. We're in the same men's group. So he came up to me one day and he said, "They call you the human rights guy behind your back." And I said, "I know. I don't care." And he said, "That's not a compliment." And I said, "Steve, I'm right and they're wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't care if they're insulting me." Well, this torture program was so patently illegal in my mind that there was never any question about it. We have the Federal Torture Act of 1946, which forbids exactly those techniques that we used. We are not just signatories to, but we're the authors of the United Nations Convention Against Torture, right? Which specifically bans.
We wrote the book.
We wrote it. We wrote the international treaty, which has, of course, the force of law in the United States. And then we just decided, we're going to do it anyway. And we did it anyway. It was so patently illegal that I just assumed somebody would come forward and blow the whistle on it. And I'm seeing these highly classified cables where people are saying, "Whoa, wait a minute. When I took the Hippocratic Oath, I swore to do no harm, and now you want me to torture this guy or revive him so he can be tortured more, and I resign. Or I'm curtailing my tour and I'm coming back to Washington." So I thought, well, I'm not the only person who who's opposed to this. So somebody's going to say something. And then nobody said anything.
Wow.
And so finally I said something. And the government fell on top of my head. So yeah, I ended up going to prison for 23 months. I have zero regrets. I would do it again tomorrow. And in the end, John McCain, thank God for John McCain, and Dianne Feinstein passed the McCain-Feinstein Amendment, which formally banned torture. It was signed into law in December of 2014, and you know the price was high, but we did it.
That's amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, torture is not even going to give you good intel, even at the end of
No,
the
it
day, right?
doesn't.
Because they're under
That
torture. You can
That's
always
right.
say, I'm being tortured.
Exactly. And the fallout from that is severalfold. So first of all, literally nothing that they said under torture can be used against them. And as a result, none of the Al Qaeda leadership have been prosecuted because nothing that they said can be used. And second, the information just isn't reliable. Is the person going to tell you what you want to know? Probably, but he's going to give you so much trash to go with it
Yeah.
that it's going to take your teams of analysts 6 months to go through it to decide or to determine what's true and what's not true. And by then, the bomb has gone off or the next attack has taken place, and it ends up netting you nothing, nothing. Besides the fact that you've put yourself on the same moral plane that they're on.
I know it's amazing to me. It seems like all of this just comes from fear. Like you mentioned,
Yes,
they're willing to break the law because they're scared of their faces being shown. They're willing
that's
to
right.
let their integrity just be trampled or to look the other way because of it's a fear, right? Basically.
Yeah. We even had there were two FBI translators that were on loan to us that night that we did the raids. And we carry out the raids. It's 3:30 in the morning, and the translators said, I don't want to translate. It's like, what do you mean you don't want to translate? Well, I don't want them to see my face. Well, then maybe you should have gone into another line of work. And so I ended up doing the translations.
Wow.
It was ridiculous. Yeah. Well, they have to have hoods. No, they have to not have hoods because it's a violation of the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the fact that no one else went along with it. When you reported them and then you got in trouble, even though you
Yeah,
knew without a doubt, you knew the law, you knew the rules, you knew that we're not, laws of armed conflict. Obviously, we follow those, we wrote them. So I guess how did you feel when you were attacked as you were reporting what is correct?
well, the initial feeling is one of extreme disappointment. But the day after I blew the whistle, I got an email from a retired deputy director of the CIA, someone for whom I had long-standing respect. And he said to me, "You've chosen a difficult road, but somebody had to say something. I only wish I had had the guts to do it myself." And that meant so much to me. I saved it all these years that it made me realize that I wasn't alone. There weren't going to be very many people to stand up for me in public. There were some, but I knew deep down that I wasn't alone.
And we're taught that, I mean, I remember at the Air Force Academy just, crawling through the mud, having people yell at you, you're so tired, you're exhausted, and they just beat it into you that, all you really have at the end of the day is your integrity.
That's it.
That's it. So now, even though
That's
you
it.
did 23 months in prison for this,
Mhm.
you would gladly do it again. It just shows that it does
Absolutely.
matter. Integrity is important.
Absolutely, I would do it again. The first interview that I gave when I got out of prison was to the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and they have a program called Hard Talk, and it's supposed to be like it's considered to be sort of the 60 Minutes of the UK, but it's very very confrontational, where they will yell and scream and point the finger at you, and they want to provoke a fight. And so I just wasn't playing the game. And finally, the interviewer says, "You're not showing any remorse at all for your crime." And I said, "No, because I have no remorse. I would do it again today. If I had the opportunity, I would do it again. I'm not making any apologies for anything. I was right and they were wrong, and history will smile on me. So, no, I show no remorse." And then afterwards, oh, and then there was a second question that he asked that he kind of got angry that I didn't respond to. He said, "You don't appear to have any hostility to the people who put you in prison." And I said, "No, I actually don't, because what would that gain for me? Right? If Nelson Mandela can forgive the apartheid government for imprisoning him for decades, or Martin Luther King can forgive the people who imprisoned him dozens of times for standing up for his rights, I have no right to be angry for being imprisoned. And so I don't gain anything by being angry or bitter. It's water under the bridge. And as soon as I said water under the bridge, he said, "I find that very hard to believe." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry that you're angry that I'm not angry, but I'm not angry." And to tell you the truth, things have worked out very nicely for me. The country has come around to my point of view. John McCain stood up on the floor of the Senate and said that without my revelations, the American people would never have had any idea what the CIA was doing in their name. And so, you get to know who your friends are, your real friends, and who walks away from you, which was also very valuable. So it was all worth it.
It's amazing. And yeah, so you were able to forgive them. Have you seen the system change? What is your feeling on the recent whistleblowers that come out and say that their lives have been threatened? Like David Grusch, they did a Freedom of Information Act request on a random sheriff location to find out issues about his home life, his PTSD issues. What's your take on these current whistleblowers?
Yeah, that's scandalous. There's First of all, I just as a policy, I support all whistleblowers. There's a legal definition of whistleblowing. It is bringing to light any evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, illegality, or threats to the public health or public safety. So if you've done that, you're a whistleblower. And if you're a whistleblower, you have rights. I would also recommend very strongly that you seek the assistance of an attorney before blowing the whistle, not after. That's the mistake that I made. I had to be reactive to everything the government was doing. So if you're thinking of blowing the whistle, hire an attorney first and have that attorney sitting next to you when you blow the whistle. But what you're talking about is actually a very common kind of harassment that whistleblowers face. The other side immediately tries to discredit you. Oh, he has PTSD. Oh, he saw, a marriage counselor 10 years ago. Oh, he's on an antidepressant. None of that is relevant to your whistleblowing.
Hmm.
It either you told the truth or you didn't tell the truth. And if you told the truth, everything that you said is protected by law.
So everything is protected by law. But in your case, you still went to jail. Is that because you didn't
Yeah.
talk to a lawyer first, or why do you think that happened?
No, no. There's a book. There's a book written by a Harvard law professor by the name of Harvey Silverglate called Three Felonies a Day. And he says that we are so overly regulated, so overly criminalized in our country that the average American on the average day going about his or her normal business commits three felonies every single day. We
Wow.
have 5% of the world's population in the United States. We have 25% of the world's prison population.
Yeah.
So if they want to get you, they're going to get you. They charged me with 3 counts of espionage for blowing the whistle on the torture program. I hadn't committed espionage. They offered me 45 years in prison. And I said no. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go to trial and I'm going to testify on my own behalf. And I might accidentally talk about some of the hideous crimes against humanity and war crimes that I witnessed in 15 years at the CIA. They ended up dropping all of the espionage charges, but then they charged me with this obscure law, obscure crime. I was only the second person ever charged with this crime in American history, called the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. And it was because I had confirmed the last name of a former coworker. That's the crime.
That's the crime.
That's the crime. And the name was never made public.
So
Never.
who did you confirm it to if it's
There
not
was a
public?
journalist writing a book, and he said, "Hey, can you introduce me to this guy named John? You used to work with him." And I said, "Oh, I think you're talking about John Doe." I said, "I don't know whatever happened to him. He's probably retired, living in Virginia somewhere." That was the crime.
That's it.
That's it.
They put you in prison for 23 months for that.
Mhm. They had to do something, and they thought that was going to silence me. See, here's the crux
Mm.
of the whole thing. They thought that would silence me, and instead it made me a star. Now I'm known internationally as a human rights activist. I'm a journalist. I'm on TV constantly. You go to my IMDb page; it's over 100 TV appearances, talking mostly about torture and the CIA and war crimes and things like that. I've written 8 books. I've not only testified before the European Parliament, but I wrote a whistleblower protection law for the Greek government that was then adopted by the European Parliament and is now the law of the entire European Union.
Wow.
They've made me what I am today, just because they thought that prosecuting me would silence me, and instead it made me somebody.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And I have to ask, he's obviously controversial. What is your take on Edward Snowden?
Oh, I think Snowden's a bona fide American hero. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have had any idea that the government was spying on us if Snowden hadn't said something. And not only is it illegal for the government to intercept our communications, it's a part of NSA's charter that they're not permitted to spy on Americans. And in fact, most of what they do is to spy on Americans. Yeah, but we wouldn't have had any idea.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
let me add something to that too, if I could, Chris. Um, a couple of weeks ago, Tulsi Gabbard, the new director of national intelligence, appeared before the Senate Intelligence Committee as part of her confirmation hearings. And senators of both parties repeatedly tried to get her to say Ed Snowden was a traitor. Both parties. And they used the word traitor over and over and over again. Well, either these senators are stupid or they're ill informed. There is a constitutional definition of treason, and it is providing aid and comfort to the enemy in a time of war. He did not provide aid and comfort to the enemy, and we are not in a time of war. There hasn't been a congressional declaration of war since December the 8th, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor.
Well,
So, by definition, he's not a traitor. Secondly, Senator Angus King, the independent Democrat from Maine, um, tried to get Tulsi to say that Snowden had defected to Russia. This is something that he kept repeating. He had defected to Russia. He did not defect to Russia. He was in the transit lounge at Moscow airport on his way to Ecuador when John Kerry, the Secretary of State, revoked his passport and stranded him in the transit lounge at Moscow airport. So there was no defection to Russia. And this nonsensical accusation that, well, he turned over to the Russians what he took from NSA. No, he turned over to the Washington Post and the Guardian and WikiLeaks what he took from NSA. It's all out there. Anybody
hmm.
can go look at it. He didn't turn it over to the Russians. It's there for any American to see. So these are just lies about Snowden to try to trip up Tulsi Gabbard. And it's a shame that it came from both the left and the right, from
Hmm.
both the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear you say that. I was just so angry to learn about the NSA, the program. Really just spying on all of our data, all Americans. And I
And I
remember,
make no
you know,
excuses.
there's no
Sorry to
excuses.
interrupt
They
you.
were found. No, they were found. It was in two federal courts. It was found that what they
Yes,
were doing was incorrect. And yet,
yes,
if I mention anything about Snowden on my channel, I mean, from diehard patrons, from long-term supporters, will just write me angry messages, saying that he's a
yeah,
traitor, he's done all these things. I don't like the way he did it. And again, they attack the person, like you mentioned. They attack him. But what about the terrible misdeeds that our government was doing, behind closed
exactly,
doors? Yeah.
exactly. Because they didn't think they'd get caught. And then for a long time after they did get caught, their response was always the same: 9/11,
Hmm. Things
9/11.
changed.
Yeah, that's all they have to say. They go before Congress, they say 9/11. It's like, yeah, you know what? That wears thin after a while. The Constitution gives me rights. You're violating my rights, and I want my rights back. Tell me, if NSA wasn't spying on Americans or was spying on Americans incidentally to spying operations on foreign nationals, why do they need a new facility in the Utah desert that has enough computer memory to hold every call, every voicemail, every text message from every American for the next 500 years? I am not exaggerating. Look it up. 500 years. Why? Why do they need our data? You know? And why,
Fear. It's all fear
when they try,
based.
it's all fear based. Again, they just go, they testify before Congress, they say 9/11, can't have another 9/11. Well, Americans didn't do 9/11. Why are you spying on Americans?
Hmm. So what you've seen in, from your own whistleblower experience, obviously you feel as strongly as I do. I feel the same about Edward Snowden. What do you think the chances are? Because I'm labeled a conspiracy theorist, or people in my lane are labeled a conspiracy theorist because our argument is that I believe David Grusch, that that there has been a long running UAP crash retrieval reverse engineering program. I tend to believe him and the other whistleblowers. Do you think it's possible that this could have happened? That it is true that there is a
I
UAP
do.
retrieval program?
I do. I think we would be fools if we didn't have a retrieval program. And of course, because of its very nature, it would have to be classified at the very highest levels. Even at the CIA, my last job at the CIA was I was the executive assistant to the deputy director. So I had literally the highest clearances, and I got to see literally everything that the CIA was doing everywhere in the world. I did not have access to what you're talking about. But similarly, I did not have a Q clearance, which is the clearance necessary
Nuclear.
to be read into nuclear and nuclear policy issues. So you can be at the very top of the security clearance food chain and still not have access to UAP information. You know that it's out there. You know that the program exists. You know that it is tightly compartmentalized, as it should be. But then at the same time, there's a big difference between acknowledging the existence of a program and releasing the details of the program. Nobody's asking the government to release the details. Just put our minds at ease that we're not crazy when we see these things in the sky, and then you say, no, you didn't. You didn't see anything. There is no such thing. Look over here. Let's talk about this instead. At least acknowledge that it's happening.
It seems like the biggest argument or the best argument is that it's a national security. We would give up our own advantage. We would give up vulnerabilities into our own systems if they release this. Do you think there's any validity to the argument that they should keep this secret based on national security?
No. And I'll tell you why. Until the late 1980s, I'm sorry, the late 1970s, the federal government did not even acknowledge the existence of something called NSA. Okay. Until the 1990s, the British government did not admit to the existence of their version of NSA, GCHQ.
Hmm.
Okay, now big revelation. We have this thing called NSA. Who cares? Nobody cares. We didn't ask to be told all of NSA's secrets. We just want to know, does NSA exist? Yes, it exists. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm going to go about my business.
Hmm.
So UAPs, do they exist? Yes. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go about my business. I didn't ask you to explain to me what the science was. I didn't ask for you to let me into the hangar where you have the pieces of the vehicles that crashed. I just want to know that I'm, where my tax dollars are going and to make sure that you guys are at work to try to keep me safe. No secrets have been spilled. It doesn't damage the national security in any way to acknowledge the existence of such a program.
Hmm. What do you think is the best way to get this information out? Do you think it is through whistleblowers? Well, is that where it'll come from?
That's probably the most satisfying because you're going to get more information from whistleblowers than you would uh, from any approved press release, let's say. But then the whistleblower puts himself at risk, at legal risk mostly. Um, so the answer is yes and no. Yes, in that if it weren't for whistleblowers, we wouldn't know half of what we know right now about things like torture and warrantless surveillance and UAPs and such. But then at the same time, I think we would all like for it to be official.
Yep.
I hate having to argue with people. Well, this whistleblower said that. Well, this whistleblower said the other thing. Well, I know that other whistleblower and that person's mentally ill, and they've been saying this, on 4chan for the last 10 years. Okay, let's make it official. Just an acknowledgement. Not asking for secrets here. Just tell us where our tax money is going. Are you guys on this case?
We'll see if we can get it maybe this year. We've seen a lot of
I sure hope
breakthroughs.
so. I'll tell you the one and only thing that I liked about Hillary Clinton, literally the only thing, was that in the 2016 election, she said that if elected president, she would release all this information.
Hmm.
And really, it was John Podesta, her campaign manager, who had the fascination with it and who talked her into staking out that position. I hope Donald Trump feels the same way because I think it's high time that we know, as John McCain said, what the government is doing in our name.
That's interesting you said that as well, because Ross Coulthard talked with him. He said that was a big argument, or he, I don't know if he believed it, or at least it was one argument, is that they were setting up disclosure to be under Hillary Clinton. Like she was going to be the disclosure president. So they had set up all these things in order to make it so that she would actually disclose the information, and then she lost. And so they had
And
to
then she
shut
lied.
everything down. That basically stopped the process
That's
of
exactly right.
disclosure. So it's
That's
interesting.
exactly right. And like I say, it's John Podesta. And it's
Hmm.
my understanding that John Podesta saw something in the sky at some point and has been fascinated by it ever since. And he's the one who talked her into doing it. Yeah. So look at it this way, too. The structure is there so that if Donald Trump wants to release it, it can be released rather quickly. But you probably know better than I. I don't know if he's ever taken a position on these things.
I've released a few videos on him and immediately lost subscribers. You know, anytime you talk about these politics going on, it's amazing. Even when they're talking about disclosure and transparency, immediately lose subscribers. So he said he doesn't believe that there's necessarily UFOs, but he does believe that the pilots saw something. So he kind of gives your standard mainstream
Okay.
vague response is what I've seen from him actually.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe Pete Hegseth has seen something, or
Maybe.
Marco Rubio. Maybe. I don't know. I hope
Well,
so.
yeah, definitely the people he has in his cabinet. Like Marco Rubio was surely briefed by many members or many whistleblowers. I'm sure Jake Barber briefed Marco Rubio and his team as well as other
Good.
people. So I think we're in
Good.
the best position I've seen at least the government in as of late. And it's interesting too because
Good.
I've never seen anything anomalous,
Right.
that I can say. Definitely not when I was flying as a fighter pilot, and I didn't even think about it as a fighter pilot. But I believe people such as yourself, right? That you obviously have integrity. I think you've shown that in the past.
Thank you.
Why would you lie about this sighting, that you saw many years ago? And I think there's so many thousands of people such as yourself that are we going to believe people like you or people that we know, or are we going to believe a security state, which obviously has a lot of
Right.
interest in keeping this stuff secret, and has shown in the past that they will break the law or go against the Constitution to, I guess, save their own skins or have less risk, if you will.
Yes, I think that's right. On CIA Declassified, which you generously agreed to appear on, um, we talked also about a recent sighting around Lake Michigan, on both sides of Lake Michigan, where most of the people reporting the sightings were meteorologists. That not only could they see these things, whatever they were, flying in the sky and going down into the water and coming back up again, but they were able to track them on radar. And then when the military comes out and says, it's not us, we don't know what the heck it is, but we're seeing it on the radar too, well, then it kind of leads to questions, doesn't it?
And then the radar tapes disappear when you ask about it
Ah,
later.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's so interesting. Yeah, why don't we finally let's talk about your CIA Declassified show. I have a little teaser of
Oh,
the
great.
show I was actually on, so why don't I play a little bit of that right now?
Great.
My whole career in the Air Force, I was trained as a scientist at
Hmm.
university. I went to USAFA. I was a material scientist. And so I never thought any of this stuff was possible. And I kind of just casually looked into it, just saying, oh, well, that can't be correct. That must be crazy.
Right.
But the more you look into it, there is an amazing amount of information. There's an amazing amount of cases. I hadn't actually even heard of that case, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. Once you start looking into this,
What should we expect to see next, especially at the Pentagon? Should we expect more transparency now that they've begun actually speaking about this in an unclassified venue? Or do you think this was a one-shot deal where a couple of years ago they said, okay, we're going to release these videos, we're going to release some redacted reports, and then that's the end of it?
well, I think they didn't even really release those original videos. They were leaked. Lou Elizondo essentially leaked them,
That's a good point.
even though they're unclassified. There's nothing classified in any of those videos that they released. And if you look, they'll release countless videos of war, of us blowing up, some building. As soon as if it's pro propaganda,
Hmm.
then they have no problem releasing these
Hmm.
videos of targeting pod images, of F-16s or other aircraft hitting targets, blowing up and killing people on the ground. But then if it comes to these videos, all of a sudden now they can't release them, too hard to
Right.
release. So those videos were actually leaked. And then the only ones that we have gotten, like I said, aren't the ones we're really asking for, which is Nimitz, Gimbal. Those are the ones. What about those analysis? So it has come at tooth and nail. The government has fought tooth and nail against this pretty much every step of the way. And when I say the government, I really mean the military industrial complex, the bureaucracy. So that would be the career bureaucrats, the
Hmm.
career people in organizations like the CIA. I'm sorry, I've pointed a lot of fingers at the CIA, but
I
also
do
the
too.
DoD. Yeah, also the Pentagon. So really, the heroes in this whole thing have been the congressmen and women. Okay, so yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
It was fun.
UAP YTV.
Unified TV. It's UNIFYD, Unified TV. It is an online TV network, a subscription network, but they have dozens of shows, lots and lots of documentaries, and they address issues like the one that we're talking about. It's been a lot of fun. CIA Declassified is a show where we take historical issues and we use the actual classified CIA documents that have been declassified to explain these historical issues. Think of, say, the Iran coup of 1953, the Chile coup of 1973, the murder of journalist George Polk in Thessaloniki, Greece, MK Ultra, MK Chickwit, these experimentation programs using LSD or mind control, all these things that have been talked about for so many years. We take the original documents and go over them. And now in season 2, we're also interviewing interesting people like you who have far deeper background on these issues than I do. So it's been good. Season 1 was a success. We even tightened it up and made it more professional looking in season 2, and I think people would enjoy it.
I just published or actually I haven't published it yet, just recorded a video talking about the JFK files release. And there's this alleged memo that JFK allegedly sent to the director of the CIA, McCone at the time, asking for all of the UFO files. But unfortunately, they've been unable to find a second copy of this or any sort of copy of this memo. All they have to go on is this one author, Lester, who says that there was a FOIA request. Have you looked into the JFK files release at all, or the assassination?
I've written quite a bit about it. I'm making an educated guess in my writing that these files that will be released soon, in the next 60 days, will not be revelatory. They will probably show information about CIA surveillance operations in Mexico City in October and November of 1963. I think that pretty much everything that's going to be released about JFK has been released. Keep in mind that in the early 1970s, CIA Director Helms destroyed a lot of documents, which was illegal, but they destroyed a lot of documents. And so I think that whatever is left, for the most part, has been released. That the new 10 or 15,000 pages of documents are going to be documents mostly that have already been released, but with fewer redactions. So we're not going to see a revelation. We could see a revelation with the release of the RFK documents.
Okay.
And in my view, that's the more interesting tranche that we should expect for a couple of reasons. Sirhan Sirhan, who was convicted of murdering Bobby Kennedy, held a revolver with 7 shots. 8 bullets were recovered. And a forensic examination in 1993 found that there were between 10 and 13 shots fired. So where'd the rest come from? Thomas Noguchi, who was the Los Angeles County coroner at the time and is world famous, said that the kill shot came from behind Kennedy to the back of the neck from a distance of 1 to 3 inches. Wow. But Sirhan was in front of Kennedy. So where did that shot come from? There's also a video showing a security guard that night named Cesar, who hated Kennedy and had written anti-Kennedy screeds because this man was a racist, a bigot, and he said that Kennedy would turn the country over to the commies and the coloreds like his brother had. And so there's a video of him in the background pulling a gun out of his waistband, and you hear bang, 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 and he puts the gun back in. Well, in the late 1980s, he's dead now, but in the late 1980s, a National Geographic Channel, 1990s, a National Geographic Channel interviewer interviewed him and said, "Did you kill Robert Kennedy?" And he said, "No, I was going to, but that Arab fella got him first." Well, he was polygraphed by the FBI as part of the investigation, and he passed the polygraph. So where did those extra shots come from? Maybe finally we'll get an answer to that question or to others surrounding the Kennedy assassination. And then the Martin Luther King documents are going to be released at the same time. There's credible evidence that the FBI, may have had something to do with that killing. The FBI tried to get King to commit suicide 3 years earlier. They sent him an anonymous letter urging him to kill himself.
Does that work? I guess.
Never.
We'll send him a letter. What if we could
his archives.
talk him into killing himself?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, James Earl Ray, who was convicted of killing him, was drunk, was in the bathroom of a rooming house a block away, sat in the bathroom all day long until he saw King, and then took that shot from a block away, drunk. Come on. So there's are some credible accusations out there that the FBI was involved. And then Martin Luther King III, his eldest son, said publicly that he never believed James Earl Ray killed his father. And he went to prison multiple times and met with James Earl Ray. Martin Luther King III believed that the FBI killed his father. And the FBI had already murdered Fred Hampton. They executed Fred Hampton in cold blood while he was sleeping, no less. They shot him in the head while he was asleep in bed because they were so fearful of that, that black savior in the 1960s.
Yeah, it seems like it all comes from fear. All these terrible deeds.
Yes, it's fear.
So, what has been from doing the show, from your experience in CIA, being a whistleblower? What's been the most, I guess, shocking thing that you've learned about UAPs specifically, or I guess most enlightening thing you've encountered?
There was nothing that I learned while I was at the CIA. It's once I got out of the CIA that I began really learning about this stuff by watching people like you, for example. It's nice to know that there are others out there who believe. There are others out there who have seen things themselves, who are not lunatics, right? When this information was leaked, what was it, a couple of years ago from the Pentagon showing video, for example, and the audio, pilot to pilot audio, saying things like, "Are you seeing this? Look at how fast it's going." It makes me realize that no, there's something out there that we just don't understand. The government wants us to think that we're crazy, or that our eyes are playing tricks on us, or we're not seeing what we think we're seeing. It's something that's easily explainable. It's not. Let's just be honest about it. I don't understand why there's such pushback against honesty and transparency. We should be transparent about this. So the last couple of years have been particularly exciting in this area.
Yeah, I completely agree. It really has been exciting, and it's great to see people such as yourself out there, John. I mean, I really think integrity is all we really have to stand on. And yeah, I really admire your courage, and thanks for speaking out now.
Much. Thank you.
Say for everybody in the audience, go check out Unified D TV, check out CIA Declassified. Link will all be in the descriptions for everything John does. And
thank you much.
Yeah, please like this video and share it to get the information out, and subscribe, and go to patreon.com/Chris Lehto if you want to support my work. So thanks again, John. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Chris. Same to you.